We are the Church of the Larger Fellowship, a Unitarian Universalist congregation with no geographical boundary, working toward creating a global spiritual community, rooted in profound love, which cultivates wonder, imagination, and the courage to act. Adapting to the COVID-19 pandemic has been difficult for many bricks and mortar congregations. Early on in the pandemic, we were in a unique position to assist many congregations with the transition. We hosted special episodes of The View, provided advice and counseling to religious professionals, and trained congregations for live streaming worship, all while providing robust online programming for our members. From worship to covenant groups, from classes to pastoral care, and from our monthly magazine to our letter writing ministry, we have found ways to build connection and community even through the screen. We have been a model for ministry on the margins, providing services for isolated Unitarian Universalists, becoming a spiritual lifeline for our members in prison, and investing in innovative ministry. We know better than anyone how deep and meaningful connections can be formed even from a distance. Unitarian Universalists have faced many challenges in these times, and we continue to persevere and to fight for justice and equity for all people, especially during moments of crisis. We are proud to be a leader in this faith movement, and we invite you to get involved in our ministry. We strive to be a place where anyone from anywhere can find spiritual refuge anytime they need it. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of the Larger Fellowship. We are so excited to bring you an all-new episode of The View. The View is a weekly Unitarian Universalist talk show discussing important faith-based topics from an anti-racist, anti-oppressive, and multicultural perspective. Every Thursday for the past 7 years, we have welcomed guests from every corner of the world. Our guests are writers, scholars, activists, and religious thought leaders who are shaping Unitarian Universalism and society for the 21st century and beyond. I hope today's show inspires you. Hope it builds your faith. Hope it gives you perspective to see the power of Unitarian Universalism at work in your life. Enjoy the message.
Good morning, good morning, good morning, or noon, whatever it is for you. I am Kiana Dene Perkins, and I am excited to be welcoming you to the Church of the Larger Fellowship, Voices of Unitarian Universalism, which we love to call The View or The Voo, however you're feeling. I like to give it a little Minnesota accent, call it The Voo. We are excited to be here with you today as we open the door and we find our seats and get settled, just like we do on any given worship service, because this is a form of worship. For me, at least it is, to be with people who are amazing, who want to be in dialogue, who want to help me better understand the world. So I welcome you all in. Find your seat, get comfy, get your coffee, get your tea. We're going to start with some introductions, and then I always like to tell people what's going to happen. So we're going to do some introductions. We're going to do some Unitarian Universalist roundup, and then we're going to get into it with our guest, Kimberley Debus. So I will tell you, I am in Ann Arbor, Michigan, the land of the Potawatomi people and land that was worked with Black and brown labor. And it is actually raining outside, so it feels very Seattle for me at least. And life is good. I am in the middle of a kitchen remodel, and yesterday they moved the oven and the refrigerator back into the kitchen. And my living room, although everything else from my kitchen is in here, feels spacious. Yeah, I'm just like, woo, look at that fan in my arm. Woo, woo, woo. So that is where I am. I'm going to turn it to my friend Chris. How are you this morning, friend?
Hey everybody, how you doing? I'm Christina Rivera, she, her pronouns, and I'm coming to you from cold, windy Central Virginia, where it's getting on my last nerve out there, this cold, and I know we're supposed to have it. I know we're all that kind of thing. But I am happy to be with you, happy to be with this group of folks, and excited for our conversation. DC, how you doing?
I am doing well. Good morning, everyone. I am here in central Pennsylvania on the banks of, I am technically right now in Northumberland, Pennsylvania, which is the place where, dear God, my brain just left me. The oxygen guy. Priestley, thank you. Gee whiz. Okay, so yeah, where Joseph Priestley lived out his days, which is really, really cool. And this is the land Susquehannock people, and I am just across the road from the north branch of the Susquehanna River. It's beautiful country. It is a little chilly, it is a little bit rainy, but it's warmer than it was yesterday, so I'll call it a win. Yeah, Janine, how are you doing? Don't
You split my weather. Well, I'm Janine Gelsinger, and I am here in Phoenix, Arizona, where it is a beautiful blue sky, but it's only going to be high of 63 today. So, it was like 80s last week for spring break. But we've also had a fair amount of rain. It's been weird weather. Usually Phoenix weather is very consistent, and we've had some rain and some chilliness. So I have a sweater on today. That's different for me. I also don't know who Joseph Priestley is, and at first I thought you were talking about the actor from 90210 that played Brandon, but I think of Jason Priestley. Who's Joseph Priestley? What are you talking about?
Wow, I feel like my age.
Very different people.
The wave of age that just came over me, and the wave of like Unitarian Universalism, like without using like elitism, like because I'm in seminary, that's a name I kind of like have to know a little bit. And so first I felt the wave of ageism, and then I felt like some UU elitism, and then I was like, I'm just gonna go with old. Feel old.
Listen, not everyone who watches the show is a minister. I'm not a minister, and this is what happens when you invite a millennial to co-host. Like, I don't know who y'all are talking about.
Joseph, and Joseph Priestley was one of the few folks who had a district named after them. So there was the Joseph Priestley district as well before those became regions, and it was also on the East Coast. So that's probably why it just hasn't made it maybe all the way across.
Sure. So he's like a minister, a historical figure.
He was a Unitarian and a scientist and a printer, and he got run out of England. It's like a bad country song. Like they burned down his laboratory, his wife and his kids died, and he just said, screw it. He said, screw this, I'm going to the New World, and came here. And and so now I live in a town with Priestley Avenue and Priestley this and Priestley that. It's really unnerving as a UU minister to live in a town where everybody knows more about Joseph Priestley than I do, because there's a museum and the library is named after him, and it's really alarming. Yeah. So
as we talk
he's
about
worth the Wikipedia look.
So before we get into the meat of all of this, because we love this historical stuff, because that's part of, I think, a little bit of our conversation today. So I want to introduce Kimberley and then include them in the UU Roundup, y'all, just because I think they're full of knowledge about our world, and I would hate to leave them out. So Kimberley Debus is our guest. Kimberley is an entrepreneurial minister living in the Washington, D.C. area. She writes witty commentary and snark on Hold My Chalice, substack.com. And she wanted to make sure that we did not forget, and this is important, she was a former CLF fellow 2015 to 16. So this is a comeback. I've been here before.
I have been here before, although not in this configuration, and this is an awesome configuration.
Yeah. So, is there anything else before? So, as we go into UU Roundup, is there anything you want to make sure that we know about? Do you want to tell us where you are and how your weather is in Washington?
Sure. So I'm a transplanted New Yorker. I've been in the Washington, D.C. area for about a year and a half. So moving from the land of the Algonquin and the Mohican to the Piscataway and Anacostan. Um, so it's a interesting culture shift from the history of those tribes. Um, um, I am I don't know what else to say other than we're gearing up for General Assembly. I'm the chair of the UUA Appointments Committee, and as you probably know, the nominations for slate from the nominations committees come out. Some amazing people being nominated, and we're still working on filling some slots that are ours to fill. But also all the summer institutes and camps and weekends are all gearing up. I'm the nurture director for SUSE, which is the Southeast UU Summer Institute, but we're watching Circe and Fairy Beach and Star Island and all of these places start to gear up and get their programming out there. So it's kind of an exciting time, I think, in Unitarian Universalism as we start bursting outward into these other places. That's what I want to say.
Yeah, so we're gonna come back to this hold my chalice stack. I want to make sure we do an all call for anything else exciting happening in the UU world. Janine.
I just wanted to shout out our very own Tanner with an amazing blog post that's been making the rounds on social media.
Oh, yeah.
That Tanner wrote about Gen Z and congregations and how to keep Gen Z's attention and how to minister to Gen Z, especially some amazing social media tips. So if you haven't seen it yet, maybe sometime by the end of the show, we might put a link in the chat, but I know you can also find it by searching, Tanner Linden, our amazing CLF colleague and buddy here, who really represented, his voice and the voice of Gen Z, I think, really well. And I know, at least when I shared it, it had some folks messaging me and asking questions and wanting to connect with Tanner. So shout out to Gen Z for making sure that our churches minister to them too.
Absolutely.
And then also, I don't know if anyone else was on it, but last night, the Side with Love team held a really awesome body politic kind of learning information showcase as a follow-up to some of the guests we had a few weeks ago about all of the anti-trans bills happening across the country. And it was really inspiring last night to hear some of my State Action Network colleagues in Texas and North Carolina and our friends in Florida and people all over the country talking about how UUs are getting together and fighting these bills. I know in Arizona, we've done a ton of work and have been able to defeat all the anti-trans bills in Arizona the last 4 years in a row. So yeah, just shout out to the Side with Love team for showcasing all of that work and then getting people connected to where that work is happening.
Yay.
Yay. And so a couple of other things in the UU universe. This past weekend was the first formal UUA presidential candidate forum, and with the fantastic, amazing Reverend Dr. Sophia Betancourt. And there's going to be several more of those leading up to GA. So we put the link, I just put the link in our chat to get out to your chat. So folks can attend those. It's super important that though we have one candidate, we are still doing presidential candidate forums so that we can get to know that Sophia and that vision that she holds for us moving forward. So I'm very excited about those. And we also have the UUA General Assembly WHERE lecturer has been announced, and it is if I could say it, you could tell you, Imani Perry, who wrote the common read of, I think it was the pandemic common read. So we're coming back to it because you know, we were kind of doing something during 2020. So we might not have all gotten to it. Which is Breathe, A Letter to My Sons, which is just a fantastic read. Just really spot on the ways in which race and inequity, how that shows up for children and how that shows up for families. And yeah, it's you know, I can't say enough about it. Go, if you haven't already gotten it during 2020, or you got it during 2020 and you like put it, you know, oh, I'm going to read this, you know, and then I don't know, pandemic happened or something like that. Now would be the time to go back and check it out. It's going to be great. And the last thing I would say is that for all of those who observe, we want to acknowledge that your holy month of Ramadan started yesterday.
Today.
I'm lost on the days. Just started. And so we want to wish everybody who is observing a season of fasting and prayer and community ritual just a lot of heartfelt love.
Ooh, what a rich roundup.
Yes.
And then
well, in the past week also, in the past week also, the Ministerial Fellowship Committee minted a fresh batch of newly fellowshipped ministers who now have to go through the normal renewal process things. And that's a big process for people on both sides of that. I know it's a lot of work for the MFC. I know that there's a lot of joy and there's a lot of anguish when people don't pass through, either on their first, second, third, whatever number of times. And so a lot of people went through a lot of stuff in the last week, and some of them are happy and some of them are not. And it's exciting, and it's just worth sending a happy thought to all of those folks who went through that.
thank you for that, DC, for that reminder that there's a lot of things happening, right? There's always undercurrents happening and movement happening. And a lot of subtext, right? So Kimberly, I want to bring you into this conversation as we talk about subtext and the things that are happening underneath.
Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit about how you started Hold My Chalice Substack?
Sure. So I'm a community minister, but I'm an entrepreneurial minister, an innovative. I'm doing an innovative ministry. My focus has been worship and the arts, but it extends to spiritual deepening, leadership. So I tend to be a person who works with congregations and religious professionals in a variety of areas. And because of that, and because of some of the sabbatical coverage I do, I get to know a lot of congregations and a lot of colleagues, ministers, religious educators, music directors, and the like. And I hear things and I see things. And let's face it, when you gather a group of people together, there's lots of beauty and a lot of nonsense. And a lot of the nonsense is not unique to any one particular congregation. And so I would listen to people tell me what's going on there, what they're struggling against. And I'm like, yep. And I've heard this before, and I've heard this before. And something sort of shifted, and we'll put part of that onto menopause and part of that onto receiving full fellowship. But things sort of opened up, and I realized, oh, that field where I used to, and I'm going to do it because I was on the swearing episode of this, the field where I used to grow my fucks has been paved over. And so I'm going to go in and say things. So I was in conversation with Oscar Sinclair, who's the minister in Lincoln, Nebraska. I'm affiliated there. And I was saying, and I want to write about this, and I want to write about that, and I want to write about this other thing. And Oscar said, oh, wow, Kimberly's going in, hold my beer. And I'm like, oh, no, hold my chalice. And we both went, oh, that's what we're calling it. So I've just come off of a 4-month sabbatical, and a lot of that was about rest and breathing and healing and some travel. But some of that was finding my writing bones again. Like I
Ooh.
couldn't write for a little while. So I started in January and I said, all right, I'm just going to start writing about these things that even I can't say from a pulpit if I want to get hired again, but things that need to be said. And I recognize that not only is it sort of unloading and like, oh, I can talk about this thing now, but also recognizing that just by writing some of these things, people see their congregations in them. I've had colleagues, I've had board presidents contact me and say, we needed this, or I thought I was the only one. You've provided not only affirmation in sometimes a really snarky way, but also tools, ideas. What can we do? What do we need to re-examine?
Can
And
you share one of those examples or one of the things that you've talked about that has garnered some response from folks?
well, sure.
Resonated with people?
Yeah, well, let's talk about this week's edition called More, More, More.
Okay.
And I addressed the question of why people want congregations to grow. And over again, we hear, oh, our pledging is down. We need more members, so we have more money. Everybody's exhausted. We need more volunteers. Let's grow. We need to grow. And those are not reasons to grow. And really, if you want to grow to use, to get their resources, it's a problem. And I quote a minister named Laura Gurin. I don't know, or Gruen. I'm not sure where Laura serves, but she said this not long ago. I fear that as long as the reason we invite people into our religious institutions is so they can fill our pews, take over our volunteer projects, and give us money, we're going to end up hurting the people who come to us looking for connection to the divine and authentic spiritual community. Because it's deeply painful to want to be in relationship with someone and find out they really only want us to keep their institution going.
Woo! Can we take a breath? Because that is,
I mean, she laid down some pretty serious truth, so I unpacked that a bit. But what happened, and what often happens with these, is people start sharing them. And they'll share them among colleagues, they'll share them with the board. And this one especially, and I was actually surprised that this one has taken so much hold that I have colleagues who said, we're adding it to the board agenda, we're making them read it. Our board is actively discussing this in email. This is huge. This is a huge moment. And so what does it mean to say, oh, why are we desiring to grow? What actually matters? And refocusing people on vision. Because, I mean, let's face it, money's been hard for the pandemic, right? And growth has been weird during the pandemic. And there are people who have fallen off and aren't coming back. So what do we do about those? And we have, a percentage of people who are mad and are using their pledges as extortion to get what they want.
So let's slow down, friend.
I'm sorry. I know, there's just so much, right?
So I want to respond to two things that you said, but one for me is super huge. When we started to come out of COVID a little bit, I started saying to the communities, whether I was a guest minister, an intern, my question was, have you, I used this analogy. If there's been a community fire, because I was working in communities who had been hit by wildfires, I said to them, is the first thing you would do after the fire is go back like nothing happened. No, you have to assess the land. You have to assess, is it okay? You have to decide if you want to rebuild there. You have to decide, wait a minute, who's my community? Where is everybody? So this desire to go back without assessing, without looking, I was able to help them see oh, maybe that is some work we need to do before we just go back.
That's right.
And I was doing that in that small community, but I will say, I also saw the need for it in our larger community, and not just to ask for. So here's my example that comes to mind, friend Kimberly, because we're friends now, is there were so many accessibility tools that we added for COVID, and without question, the moment we could, we snatched them away.
I know.
People stopped doing Zoom and didn't even assess how it helped, who it helped, how could we balance the two as opposed to just ripping the one away. And I just feel like we did ourselves communally as a denomination a disservice of not looking at what helped us through COVID and what could remain in a way that kept us. And so I think it's not even just the getting people on, it's not even just growing our membership, but we haven't taken stock of who we are or what we are or what we're about.
That's true.
And so I'll stop there, but so other folks respond to that first part, and then we'll start talking about money, because that's a whole different ball of energy, I think.
Well, and I just want to say that, last year I did a lot of trainings on multi-platform worship and said, these are things you need to keep. And here are the reasons why. That this is about accessibility. It is about maintaining some memberships. It is about doing it in a new way because we can't go back. Yeah.
Janine.
So Kimberly, when I saw that you were going to be our guest, I went and I read a bunch of your blog, your Hold My Chalice blog. And it looks like what you're doing is a lot of truth telling. And I think that's so important. I try to be a truth teller too. And you mentioned that you feel like you're saying things that can't be said in pulpits. And so what I've been thinking about, though, is like the indictment of Unitarian Universalism, of the fact that you can say these things that feel true, and boards, you said boards are printing them out and bringing to the boards meetings. But like when Chris also publicly says things that are true, people threaten to, death threats against her children. And how many young people and how many trans ministers and how many ministers of color are constantly facing completely different consequences for this kind of truth telling. Whereas for you, you've gotten, people weeping with joy, as DC said, that you're saying these things. And so can you speak to that a little bit? Like what that position of privilege feels like to you and what you hope that will accomplish?
Absolutely. So first of all, I recognize that the things I am saying generally are not my experiences. Like I'm not on the ground experiencing the discrimination that brilliant young queer ministers who are not dudes are experiencing, because I'm not young and I'm not regularly in a pulpit. I also recognize that because I am white and I'm writing from a white perspective, there is some sense of collecting my people. And that was especially true when I wrote the post about trans lives. I addressed it very clearly to the cis folk. This is an issue. We need to hold those people. In allyship, we talk about, collecting your people and helping your people on. And so I do think that privilege allows me to say some of these things. I haven't gotten deeply into race. I haven't gotten deeply into a little bit into ability. I haven't gotten deeply into class issues yet. I haven't even started talking about worship, and that's my thing, right? That's my jam. But I do think that I do have that, and I always think about, how am I including those who are on the margins, who can't say these things? And yes, we hope that every minister is a truth teller, and there's a political negotiation in the pulpit. We hope that every religious educator is a truth teller, and there's a balance, right? There is politics in every situation, and measuring what that is, and sometimes taking a chance. Chris took a chance. It was brave, it was smart, it was the right thing to do, and it still hurts. What? It's 6 years later, and it still hurts.
And I think, I think it's, as you said, that I don't think it's so much that we can't say what, the truth is, and it's funny that this came up because I was just in a space earlier this week with religious professionals of color, and we were talking about this very topic, and we were talking about the fact that it's not that we can't, we can. We're constantly doing the calculus in our mind
That's
at
right.
every gathering, at every sermon, at everything we write, at every place we're at. We're constantly doing the calculus. Is this worth it? Is this worth it? Is this worth it? Is this worth it? Is this worth it?
Yeah.
Because we know of the backlash that we will face,
Mhm.
that we've seen. And so we are that constant calculus is exhausting.
Yeah. Yeah.
It
Yeah.
is exhausting. So like, even if you're not saying anything, like now I have to be even more careful about what I say,
Mhm.
right?
Right. Right.
And so that constant calculus is just like, fuck. Sometimes I just want to say the thing, and I don't want to have to do the calculus. And my kids are older now, so that part of the calculus is different, which it feels better. So there's the calculus part. And then the second part that we were talking about was, so when we do the calculus and the calculation comes up, yep, we got to say something, because we are the ones that are pointing out the issue in the system, it automatically becomes ours to fix.
Right. Right.
Right. And so our ability to say, this is for you all to fix, is because our positional powers are different. It just lands differently. So we're doing the calculus, and then I have to do the one of three options. I tell folks, the painful truth, and I'm like, this is all for you all to fix. I'm telling them the painful truth and saying, I'm willing to work with you on some of this to fix, or I'm telling them the painful truth because they've hired me to do so. And then I'm there. And I always preface this with, please don't expect any other religious professional of color to be doing this work with you. I'm doing this with you right now because you're paying me to be in this space.
Yep.
And so it's a constant calculus.
It absolutely is. And I recognize.
I see Kiana Dene wanting to
yeah,
say
sorry.
something.
I was just nodding to say, as a professional and as a person in seminary, I do that same, I call it actuary level math. I feel like I'm doing insurance level math. And, through, COVID and all of those things. But like, for me, I'm like, wait, did something I say or something I feel might be something that can now be used against me as I go to get jobs. And so some of the math that I get to do is, I'm a large body, dark, not light skinned. Somebody told me I'm not dark skinned. I don't know. But I'm not light by any means. And I have these locks. You don't forget about me. I'm a very memorable person. So I have to do this math, not only for the moment, but also for the future. And I have to assume that there will be churches who will not hire me based on all of this, but also because I've said a truth that they couldn't digest.
Oh, for sure.
One of the comments I've gotten as I've preached places is, you seem like you're lecturing, and you seem a little hard. You're not as soft as you could be. Could you tell a personal story? And I'm always taken aback, because really what they're asking me for is, I need you to bleed for me so I can believe that your pain is real, or I need you to be so vulnerable that what you're saying feels believable, because you're being so intelligent and you're articulating so many things to me that I can't comprehend. I can't connect with you. But if I told you, and so all of this is to say, I really had to say to people, I do not preach from my trauma. You are not my therapist, and I'm not going to preach from you from a painful place.
And here's the other thing, that when you present it in that intellectual mode that many of our people respond to, you're making them uncomfortable, because you're telling broad truths instead of, here's the personal story that I can dismiss because, it's just Kiana Dene.
And also the other thing I get is, people are like, I feel like you're lecturing. And I'm like, well, if you've never heard of E.E. Brown, who was the first in 1912, first ordained person, Black man, who still couldn't get a pulpit, that's not me lecturing, that's
Mhm.
education. And if you can't
Right.
tell the difference, lecturing requires that I'm trying to tell you something different, but we can't talk about the impact of Blackness and Unitarian Universalists if we don't have a base of education.
That's right.
So I'm not lecturing you. I'm giving you a level of education you've never sought out, never thought to examine. And I'm telling you it so I can tell you the part of my story where I am healed, right? I'm
Yeah.
giving you enough base. So I get this feedback. So it's very interesting what I'm allowed to say, what I permit myself to say, because nobody allows me anything. I should change my language.
Yep.
I know that I'm in a fragile, fragile place. And that because, and I'm going to come back to something you said because it's 1236, because I know that we live in a community that likes to hold money hostage and hold shit over people's head like animals, as if this is a Roadrunner cartoon. I also know I have to walk softly around that too. And I'll say this, and this is from the bottom of my heart. I'm so glad Tanner spoke up about being a Gen. Is that what y'all are, Gen Xers? I don't know anymore.
Gen
We're Gen X. Tanner's Gen Z.
Okay, right. I don't know if they're Gen, because as much as I need, I'm gonna say this is why I said that. Ready? Just as much as I need old people to pay my bills right now, I need those young people to pay my bills in 25 years. And I have to satisfy both palettes. I am a sandwich generation minister. I am in the middle of two conversations in two places. So all of this comes back around to say, let's talk about the part of more that is about, that you spoke to, if you could just kind of address that a little bit, that talks about people holding their pledges hostage,
right,
and making church transactional.
Yes. Yeah. So this shows up in several of the episodes or the posts, the stacks. I really talk about it and I'm trying to pull it up in a piece called "Bully for You," where I talk about bullying and the ways that people try to extract power because they think church is a capitalist organization. And what I preach a lot, but I try and point out here, is that we are countercultural. We are, yes, we have to exist in the world of finance and money because that's the water we swim in at the moment to get, the bills paid and the people paid fairly and all of that. But there's a way of thinking about money that isn't everything is transactional. Members aren't stakeholders. And when you remember that, and this, I address this elsewhere too, when you remember that you are not a consumer or a volunteer in your congregation, you are in service. It belongs to you. There's a blog post that I can't find the name of the woman who wrote it at Pathos, who said, just as you can't babysit your own kid, you can't volunteer at your own church. And so that investment of time and, let's say, and treasure is not about doing something good like you would give to a food pantry or work part-time with, kids or something. This is about sustaining the community that sustains, supports, and encourages you to spread the work of love in the world, right? So when people say, I'm going to withhold my pledge or reduce it until you do what I want, which often means get rid of the minister or the religious educator or whatever, this is, it's extortion, it's bullying. And so when we understand our pledge money, our stewardship drives as how do we keep our community, my community, whole, how do we do what is right so we can fulfill our mission, you're not going to extort that. You're going to say, I don't agree with this mission. I need to find another place to be. Not, I'm going to withhold this until you fire the minister, put announcements back in the worship service, make me the chair of the thing that I've been chair of and screwed up for 20 years, right? Like there are many
Bring back
things.
spoken joys and sorrows.
Oh, put back spoken joys and sorrows, right? All of these things, right? Stop wearing masks. What all the things are, right? There's a problem with that. And yes, we do need to get paid. So I'm not saying we don't need money, right? I'm saying how we approach what we do and how we understand the role of money to help us do all that we do, right?
And money can't be the only stewardship. If
That's
all you're
right.
doing is giving money, then you are in a transactional relationship with me. But if you're giving, if you see your service as a part of your stewarding the space you are in, whether it's learning how to take out the trash, making coffee 5 times a year, I'll do it the 5th Sunday. Whether it's learning where the sign is that says the sidewalk is slippery, knowing how to put out the salt. There are so many things beyond the minister, the RE director, and paying the bills that make a community a community.
That's
and
right.
If we're willing to be a part of all of that, then we have to do the work that sustains all of that. And that is volunteering our time. We use the word volunteer because we don't have great language, but we have to see our interaction with a church to be more than a financial exchange of I paid you this much and I come Sunday morning and I have an expectation.
That's right.
Well,
And
and
it
I
also
think
needs
it
to be-
needs to be
Chris,
that stewardship of
Christine.
Unitarian Universalism
Yeah.
needs to be the rest of the week, right? It's not
Right.
just about what you can do at your congregation. It needs to be your primary identity as you go about your everyday life. If your primary identity is as a Unitarian Universalist, then everything that you do when you're at the bank, when you're at the post office, when you're in your job, when you're, at the food bank, when you're wherever you are, the ways in which you are going to be acting are going to be stewarding Unitarian Universalism.
That's right.
So it has to be both. It has to be,
Mm-hmm.
that you're sustaining the Unitarian Universalist community, but it also has to be stewarding Unitarian Universalism.
That's right.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Janine had their hand up.
Yeah, I think, so I don't know if everyone knows this, but I started my religious professional career as a membership professional, as the director of membership and welcoming ministries at UU Phoenix, actually. Susan Frederick Gray gave me my first religious professional job. And my chair of membership and I wrote a program we did at GA a couple years called Radically Inclusive Pathway to Membership, in which we called on congregations. We piloted it and then spread it to other congregations for a membership program that's not just about money and pledging, and something that's actually deeper, that connects to the mission. Because if you decide that membership of your congregation isn't just about money, then you're not letting money be the boss. You're making sure your mission is the boss.
That's exactly.
I mean, that's how, and I don't run a congregation, right? I run a nonprofit, a UU State Action Network, but we also get to decide as religious professionals whether we're going to let capitalism be the boss or whether the mission is the boss. I've had a volunteer or person in our state that was working with UU Jazz who said some pretty out of covenant things in an email to one of my staff people. And so, I called her in, as we do. Hey, I just want to remind you, this is how we agreed to be together. This is how we speak to each other. And, want you to remember the dignity of this staff person who is trying their best and, trying to get this all figured out. And she did it again and, called him some awful names in an email. And I told her to stop. She threatened to withhold her pledge. And so we refunded her pledge and said, now you don't have to worry about it anymore. You're no longer pledging. And I mean, I think we get to choose.
That's right.
Who's the boss. We either get to make money the boss or say, nope, actually, our values are so clear that money is not a loophole around them.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting. I'm reminded of something that happened in my alma mater, my undergrad. I went to Meredith College in Raleigh, North Carolina. And at that time, and for decades and decades and decades, Meredith was one of a number of colleges in North Carolina that received some money from the state Baptist Association. And that was fine. And the relationships were great. And in the 90s, a kind of fundamentalism took hold, and they had this idea that they were going to tell any institution that took their money who could be on their board and what they could and couldn't teach. And with the exception of one that was very clearly a Baptist seminary, all of them said, you know what? We don't need that money. Meredith said no, lost the $1 million they got every year. Within 2 days, they had $5 million and a list of new board members from
Mhm.
outside who just said, we were just waiting.
Yep,
And
there's a
so
bunch
if
of other
it can
examples of that.
happen to an educational institution that continues to grow, go Meredith, it can happen in our congregations. We don't have to be held hostage by the curmudgeon, the guy
Yeah.
who insists, yeah, maybe he is giving $10,000 a year, but guess what? There are people who will come forward and say, now this place, without this person, I can enter these walls. I can be who I am. I don't have to worry about the bullying. The atmosphere has changed. We can do what we want to do. And
Mhm.
that's where I want to put my time, talent, and treasure.
Yes,
And we're seeing there.
amen.
Right.
Yeah, and you see, I mean, wasn't it Boulder, maybe, UU,
Mhm.
that had a preschool renter that didn't like their trans
Yeah.
their all gender restrooms?
Yeah.
And so they stuck to their values, and the renter left and immediately found another preschool that was very happy to move in and
Yeah.
have all gender restrooms.
Yeah.
So, you know, if we let fear and scarcity run us instead of our mission and our values, then we'll be in an endless cycle of chasing money.
That's right. That's right. And it's hard, right? The bullying thing is hard because, oh, Bob has been around forever. Oh, he's really
He's one of our founding members.
He's one of the founders. Oh, it's just Bob. And they make excuses. And, oh, yeah, he's kind of mean, but, right? And so some of the work we have to do is encouraging them to say, oh, but that's not covenantal. That's not supporting our community. That's not fulfilling our mission. That's not Unitarian Universalism.
And how many people came and visited your church once or
Mhm.
twice, but didn't come back because of Bob?
That's right.
Right? So if so many people are ready to be like, oh, it's just old Bob saying, you know, the racist stuff that he says. I mean, I don't want to hang out in a church with Bob. I don't want to go to that church.
Nope. Nope. Absolutely not. And there are Bobs in not every congregation, but pretty close to every congregation. And so, you know, I feel like one of the things I get to do is help people with Bob's and others and other problems that they have. This Substack gives them one more tool to say, see, it's not just us. See, this really is a problem. Right. And I have a huge list of things still to write about that I haven't even gotten to yet because things keep coming up.
Can you talk about some of the pushback that you've been getting?
Oh, yeah. So
I'm sure not everybody is happy to read what you write.
No, not everybody is happy to read what I've written. There are misogynists who think I'm being, I don't know, is it uppity when you're a white woman? I don't know, but I'm definitely, you know, I'm out of line. And how dare I? There is the gentleman who wrote me a very long email who told me that how dare I talk about extortion as bullying, because that's an important tool of managing your membership in a congregation and getting the things to go right and run their way. I had
And he's not wrong, right? Like
right.
he is not wrong.
He
That
is not
is
wrong.
the way that congregations have worked.
Yep.
That's the way our corporations have worked. That's the way our U.S. capitalist society has worked. And
That's
so, I don't necessarily blame folks for expecting the world to work that way when it is the way the world is set
Right.
up to work.
Right.
What I do have an issue with is when we explain ad infinitum that is not in keeping with Unitarian Universalist values, when
Right.
people are then unwilling to make a
Right.
change. Like, I am all
Right.
for, if folks come in and just like, I didn't know, can you explain it to me? Once, sure, absolutely. But if you've been explained to again and again and again and again and again, and you're still putting up the same questions, what do we call that, folks? Anybody remember?
Sea
Sea
lining?
lining, right?
Yeah.
Oh, that's definitely sea
Sea
lion. Yep.
lining. We're just going to
Right.
continue
But I
to ask
just
this-
want you to explain to me again, Chris. Tell me. I just want to understand. Why won't you talk to me about this? You keep saying these things.
you keep saying these things, and I keep not. And I'm like, well,
Right.
now we've moved on, right?
That's right.
From where I'm
Right.
ready and willing to be a thought partner with you, because I am. Like,
Right.
I go, part of my life, is CLF. Another part of my life is a consulting gig, and I
Yeah.
go out and consult for money with nonprofits, universities, congregations, churches, dioceses, like all of those places.
So-
And I'm absolutely willing to have those conversations and actually enjoy it. What I don't enjoy is when I've done the work, we've done the work, and that person still doesn't want
Right.
to make the
Right.
change.
Right.
Like,
Well,
at that point, then we have a different relationship.
And there's something interesting about it, because and I got this from a conversation with Alex Capitan, that there is something that happens when people become insiders in this outsider faith. And there's this moment of, oh, I know what it's like. I know what it was like when I came in and this faith saved me, caught me, made me feel good. Right. And they don't move from that. And now they're inside. They helped found the congregation. They've been in leadership for a long time. Right. And so we move. I mean, that's who we are. We are a living tradition. Living tradition.
So I bopped away, but I wanted to add something to the conversation, and I apologize if we've moved on, but I want to say what I'm also seeing is folks holding on to roles in communities long after they're done, and it creates a codependency that's unhealthy.
Yep.
So just like folks want to hold their money hostage, if you've been in a role for 7 or 8 years and you've been looking for 2 years for somebody to take on the role of leadership, step away. And I don't say that to sound like you're not wanted or you're not needed, but it's created a level of codependency.
That's right.
That means the church doesn't have to change. Susie has always done this work. Susie's been doing it. We know Susie's tired of doing it, but we're not going to say anything, and we're not going to force ourselves to step up.
That's right.
So in this last week in my community, I've had 2 people, which might feel really hard, step away from really important volunteer roles, but I'm really proud of them because they're stepping into their autonomy. They're actually going to go do the work that they feel most called to do. And now we have to have a response.
Right.
Because our response before was, well, they're still here, so I don't have to respond. Just like with the money piece, right? They're not giving us money, but they're holding us hostage in a way. And I just froze again, didn't I?
No, we can still
Did
hear
I
you.
freeze again? Oh, did I freeze again?
You're frozen, but we can hear you.
Okay, so I'll just close up by saying there's more than one way to hold the community hostage.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And sometimes other people will fill the void, and sometimes you look at it and go, we actually don't need this anymore.
Exactly. Right. So one of the things that I see in this whole, like, I'm a big pledger, so I'm going to call the shots. That is such a hijacking of the democratic process, because what that boils down to is every one of my dollars is a vote, and every one of your dollars is a vote. And if I give $10,000 and you give 20, guess who gets to call all the shots?
That's right.
That's not how this is supposed to work. Everybody gets one vote, and that's and I think what we see happening. So I'm sorry, I was reading the comments. So it's interesting that the people who are screaming so hard about the fifth principle, which is our democratic process, are also the ones trying to hijack the democratic process with their extortionary pledging practices.
Yep.
Okay? They're the ones who are saying, but I give 5% of the total budget. That means I should get a lion's share of the voice in the decision making. Well, that's not how this works.
Members are not stakeholders.
Right. And right. But I mean, that's the thing that has been happening. And I have to say that Kimberly is describing a situation that happened in a congregation I used to serve, where what it really boiled down to was the minister was too queer.
Yep.
The minister was too queer, and we're uncomfortable with that. And so,
even though
and
they called you because you were queer.
patriarchy.
I mean,
that's something I get anxious about all the time. I'm actually preaching about that in the sermon this month, about the fact that people want my diversity is a publicity stunt, but they don't want my blackness in the back. Like, you want my blackness and my queerness in the front of the house, but because if I'm really going to be here, I'm cleaning up the front and the back of the house. I'm not a publicity stunt. So you want my publicity, you want my blackness when it's convenient, but you want my silence when I'm telling the truth. And it's
facial diversity.
Yeah.
Facial diversity.
Like they just wanted you to look queer so that they had a queer minister in the pulpit, but they didn't want you to act queer.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Your queerness, your otherness is what they want to be shown. But your stuff, like, I show up as a black woman all the time, Janine. I don't get to show up partial. Like, I don't get to show up in my face black. Everything I talk about is black. Everything I talk about is queer. So if you ask me to show up to look black, but to not be black, there's already a problem.
That's right.
Right. Yep. Same thing here. If you want me to be the, it's like for so long, mainstream folks were like, we like gay people as long as they behave like straight people.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Like, we like gay people as long as they want to get married and settle in the suburbs and have, minivans and be soccer moms. We don't want gay people if they're going to be drag queens. We don't want gay people if they're going to be leather daddies.
We don't want gay people if they're going to be bi.
Right. Or bi, right? That's just confusing and suspicious.
I am a very confusing element in the world.
So folks, we have about 1 minute warning.
Yeah,
this conversation is so good and juicy. We might need to call you back. And when we call you back, I want to talk more about the difference between what you're doing on Substack and social media, and maybe bring in some other voices who are using media in different ways to help us better understand who we are as a Unitarian Universalist people.
I would love that.
Before we close out, does anybody have any burning hot on pants, burning fire thing in 1 minute that they can share?
I had an interview. Michael, yes. There he is. Oh, wow.
Oh, wonderful.
Wow, congratulations. Good for you.
Yeah.
And when we get back, isn't that when we have Who's on the show when we get back? Is that Sarah?
Somebody.
Is that Sarah's
Michael's
show?
just excited he made it through this show. He's gonna hit a button and like talk to his audience. That's it.
Right.
Yes. Oh,
Oh.
okay. So what Michael
Okay.
said was that there is not a show next week because the co-leads and Tanner and the CLF board will be meeting for the first time since the pandemic in person and Montgomery, Alabama. To be also able to experience the Peace and Justice Museum and Memorial. So come back and find us, same place, same time, not next week, but the week after. Bye, y'all.
And invite me back.
Bye, y'all. Bye, everybody. Will do. Totally.
Thank you for joining us. Special thanks to those of you who give generously to this ministry. It is because of you that this ministry is possible. You can click the link in the description to give now or visit clfuu.org/give for more information. We hope you will join us next week for another episode of The View.